Awesome. Well, good morning. Thanks a lot for coming back in. I was getting kind of worried for a moment. Richard did such a great job during the keynote. I was thinking maybe you guys wanted to see that level of quality all day. It's a good thing that you wanted to take a break from that level of quality and hang out with me for an hour. So, real quick introduction. My name is Brady Gaster. I am a senior PM, program manager, not project manager or product manager. Kind of a religious debacle if you say the wrong thing. And I work for Docs Microsoft Com. Has anybody seen the stuff that we're doing with Docs MS Com recently? Anybody check that out? Good, I'll show it to you later. We'll talk all about it. What we've done is we've totally re-engineered our documentation systems at Microsoft. Anybody ever use MSDN or TechNet? You guys use this things? Well, they're all going to move over eventually. So we're going to have all the documentation in one place. Why are we doing that? Gartner said it was a good idea. In all seriousness, Gartner did a lot of analysis to figure out what our customers liked and disliked and what they felt like customers felt were blocking issues for them. And one of the things we found was that customers really hated the fact that they would, come to Azure.com and they would go to GitHub.io, then they would go to MSDN, and then they would go to TechNet. They never knew where to go. So we sort of concluded that the best thing would be for us to unify everything under one very easy to find domain. So we're putting everything under Docs MS Com. You'll see stuff migrate there slowly but surely. Some of us would say too fast. I would definitely say too fast. We're definitely moving a lot of stuff over. And I'll talk a little bit more about that today. Our agenda today, what we're going to talk about is building VS Code extensions. Has anybody tried to build a VS Code extension so far? Good, you're in the right place. Has anybody ever tried to extend Visual Studio? I have good news. It's a little bit easier to extend VS Code. Totally different model. I do want to point that out. Somebody actually asked me a question recently, somebody from a conference circuit in Sweden. They said, could you do a talk where you show off both? I said, yeah, but that would be like a 5-hour talk because the two things are totally different. You can't write a VS Code extension and it work with VS and vice versa. Occupational hazard. So those two things, they don't go together. I'm going to talk a little bit about, we're going to go through and talk about some different areas. The first one we're going to talk about is your prereqs, things that you're going to need to have installed on your computer. We'll talk about how you can scaffold extension projects and snippets, commands, how you can do user experience or UX inside of VS Code. We're going to talk a little bit about editor interaction. If we can get to that, it's kind of a deep demo. I definitely want to talk about publishing because why would you build an extension if you can't let other people use it? So we definitely want to go through and talk about publishing out to the marketplace. And we'll talk a little bit about some design considerations as you're building your VS Code extensions. I'll sort of pepper the talk with conversations about design considerations as we go. But then at the very end, we'll kind of wrap it all up and talk about some of the important things you want to think about as you're building your extensions. Now, I have a talk later on this afternoon. I'd highly encourage you to come to if you're in Azure, where I'm going to be talking about the Azure tools for VS Code, which is an extension that I started in order to learn the Node SDK because I was putting out the documentation for it. So I wanted to kind of take it from the perspective of a user, like just having reference documentation on how to build this stuff. So I'll go a lot and look at the docs and kind of show you how all that works. But we'll be flipping between VS Code and the deck and the VS Code documentation on the Extensibility API. I'll be doing all my demos today in JavaScript. You could do your stuff in TypeScript. I'll probably have a second version of this talk eventually where we do everything in TypeScript. It's not that I don't like TypeScript, I just don't know TypeScript. I'm going to be completely transparent with you. I just haven't learned it yet. All right, prereqs. First thing is you need Node. You got to have Node because Node is a requirement of Visual Studio Code. So you just can't get out of that. If you've got VS Code, guess what? You've got Node. Your prereqs are pretty much already met. There's a couple of NPM packages that you're going to want to install. The first one is Yeoman. Anybody ever heard of Yeoman? Yeoman templates? Okay, Yeoman templates are basically a way for you to scaffold out to create kind of the skeleton. There's a joke coming to create kind of a skeleton of an application or an extension. So we have these things called Yeoman templates, and then or the Yeoman template generator, and then each set of templates is actually created as an NPM package. You can see that I have the ASP.NET one, I have the Azure Functions one, I have the code one, which is what you need to do code extensions, and then I also have the Node generator. So what those do, they basically just scaffold out the skeleton of a project. The third thing you're going to need to install, again, all of this is installable through NPM, is VSCE. the Visual Studio Code extension publishing tool. I think that's what it's called. But this really just gives you a couple of command line tools that you can package up your Visual Studio Code extension and put it up in the marketplace. All right. So the way you get started is you yo code. We'll do this today, and I'll be using JavaScript for everything. And when you do this, what happens is you slide in the skeleton of your Visual Studio Code extension. Once you get that slid in, then you can go ahead and you can party on it and start doing things. Now this is pretty much where the demos start, and there's going to be a lot of demos. In fact, there's going to be 14 demos. The good thing is I'm a PM, and I know that I can't code. So I've done all these demos as snippets in VS Code. So you'll just see me jamming the snippets. I also want to point out that the majority of this talk is on GitHub. I can actually show you that GitHub URL here in a moment. If you want to find me, this is one way, my blog, bradygaster.com. If you really want to find me, this is the best place, Twitter. I have a certifiable Twitter addiction. If you want to find me, that's how you do so. That's how my wonderful chauffeur found me at the airport. One thing that I've talked about is my day job, working on reference documentation, primarily for Azure. We just deployed this and the Python reference documentation just last week. This is what I use to, not this particular one, we just deployed it last week, but everything I know about the Node SDK I learned from their GitHub IO site, which we now have on docs.ms.com. So I do want to point out that the Node SDK for Azure lives here. You can actually go in, let's say you wanted to know how to do something with virtual machines. I can actually type virtual machines right here. See, here's the object for virtual machines. I can click this guy, and now you can see all the methods for all the virtual machine functionality is directly right here in the IDE. This actual reference site is generated directly from the Node SDK code, because they use JSDoc throughout all their code, and we actually interrogate that JSDoc and generate this stuff. What does that mean for you? That means that the documentation is as up to date as is the SDK, because every time they do a commit to their repository, we update the docs. So you have up-to-date docs. I just want to point that out. Unfortunately, the Visual Studio Code Extensibility API is not yet on docs.ms.com. I'm talking to them about that. I'm going to leave this browser open all day because we're going to bounce around, and I'm going to show you some of the different APIs in the extensibility model. And I want you to know that this is actually the best place to go. If you were to go to code.vs.com and you look over here in the extensibility reference, you'll see this VS Code namespace API. Everything in the VS Code extensibility model is on this page. So you can just go here, and if you wanted to figure out how to create an output channel, I could do create output, and there you go. And if I were to expand this guy, it's really going to show me all the parameters. And then if I click this link, it's going to link me down lower on in the page to where that object happens to live. So I want to point out that everything you're going to see here today, I learned on this URL. I just want to stress that. So what I'll do real quickly is I want to fire up VS Code. Now I'm using a Mac. Everything I'm going to show you today, you can do on a PC, you can do on Linux, doesn't matter. As long as you've got Node installed and you've got VS Code installed, you can party on it. Actually don't need code yet, but what I am going to do is I'm going to open up my terminal, because I'm going to use that scaffolder. So I'm going to go CD sources, and then I'm going to do CD into this guy. And see that it's already got a Git repo here. So what I'm going to do is just clear my screen, and then I'll just type yo code, enter. And then the ASCII art's going to come up. You want a TypeScript or a JavaScript? I want JavaScript. And you can do other ones if you want to. You can do an extension pack. So if you have multiple extensions you want to write and take dependencies on one another, you can do that here. Code snippets. I'm going to show you a couple of those today. We're going to manually do this, but if you wanted to start with a brand new code snippet thing, you could do that right here. It's going to ask you to import a TextMate snippet. I don't like that. I don't know TextMate. I don't know Sublime. I know code. So I start completely from ground zero, and we're going to build a snippet together and walk through what it would look like if you wanted to embed that into an extension and ship it. Color theme, language support, yada yada. I'm just going to do an empty new extension with no tweaks on it. I'm going to do it with JavaScript. So I'll hit enter, and we'll call this guy demo target, because this is actually where I'm going to be targeting a lot of the tests. Basically what we're going to do is we're going to write a very simple extension, and then we're going to test that extension out inside of another extension. It's kind of like a development environment. I'm going to do this twice because we're also going to create a demo workspace that we can party on. So What's the description? I'm not going to enter any of this stuff. It already knows my publisher because I've already done published extensions before, so I'm just going to leave that alone. If I wanted to initialize a Git repository, I could do that right here, and all that does is that just lays down a Git repository locally for me, and then I can create a remote, push it up. I'm not going to do that today because I'm not going to be committing this, and I've already got a Git repository in this containing folder, so things would get pretty uncomfortable. I'll do no. What's nice is it goes ahead and it installs all the npm packages for me. Even if I'm doing this in TypeScript, it knows that I need the VS Code Extensibility kit. It knows that I'm going to need a couple of other npm packages. So it goes ahead and installs this directly for me right off the bat. And I'm going to do yo code one more time. And this time I'm going to do just JavaScript, leave it alone. I got to kill that. So I didn't give it a name. I'll do yo code. I'll do JavaScript, and we'll call this guy target. I'll call it demo workspace. We'll leave that alone, leave that alone, leave that alone, no git, and let it install the npm packages again. Go ahead.
Sorry, can you make this auto?
Yes, I can. There, is that better? Cool. I'll probably have to do that once I'm in VS Code, and I've already got everything wired up, so all I have to do is type code dot, just like you do with the command line on PC, and it's going to go ahead and open this guy up for me. Unfortunately, that's not where I want to be. Actually, what I want to do point out is I'm going to show you this README file right here. This README file is at the root of the repository, which I'll put up before the end of the talk, and this literally is my cheat sheet for this talk. So if you decide you want to do this presentation at a conference or in your office at like a lunchtime presentation, it's totally open source. You can download this, tweak the README, add demos, decks in the repository. So I want you to know that I encourage you to party on this all you want to. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to cd into one other folder, demo target, and that's when I want to open up code because that's where we're going to actually be building our extension. So I've got this guy open. Now, first things first. First thing I want to do is actually want to open my cheat sheet just to make sure I keep myself honest, just to make sure I'm going in the right path. Now what I will show you here is that if you wanted to look at the snippets that you already have on your computer, you can go into code, go to preferences, and go to user snippets. And then this drop-down menu, this is called the command palette. This is going to pop up and it's going to say, what snippets do you want to look at? I want to look at my JSON snippets. So I'll hit JSON. Now this is my JSON.json file that happens to be in my user snippets folder. If you want to know where that is, you can right click this guy and you can say reveal in Explorer or reveal in Finder if you're on a Mac. And it takes you right to where this is. It's basically in your user folder, snippets folder, and then for each language, you got a JavaScript JSON and a JSON JSON. Kind of annoying to have the JSON there. But the idea behind this is if you want to have specific snippets, like you don't want to type console log 100,000 times, you can make your own snippet, put it in your snippet file, and then you can use it whenever you're inside of VS Code. At the same time, folks like my buddy John Papa, he has written a Azure Functions extension that literally has a bunch of snippets that make it easier for people to work against Azure Functions. So you can actually ship your own snippets. Now to do that, the first thing I'll have to do here is I'll make a new folder, and I'm going to call this guy, what do I want to call it? Call it Snippets. And I'm going to make a new file in here, and we'll call this file console.json. That's what it's going to be. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to type demo1, and that's actually I'm using a snippet to build a snippet. It's meta. Okay. For whatever reason, it always takes this out, so I'm going to have to add it back in. I want to flip over to my guy and just make sure I've got the right syntax, and I do. So this is all done. Now what I've done is I have literally written this workspace, the folder that I have open, is a brand new VS Code extension folder that I've created from yo code. I've created a folder in it called Snippets. I've put a JSON file into that folder, and I've got a snippet set of code in here that I'll be able to reuse. So if I wanted to use the snippet, all I'd have to do would be to type log to console. I've got a new pointer on my desk, and I'm using my finger. Apologies. I could do it. So log to console. Now it's not going to work. Technology. What are you going to do? Okay. So maybe it'll only work when I'm in PowerPoint. So the idea behind this is now I could actually use this in my own extension. Now the way I would do that is just like with anything else. I would hit F5. This is actually going to launch this guy up, and then I could You see I've got this demo workspace. I've actually already got my workspace open. So I could go into this guy, and if I wanted to type log console, and look, it's not there. I don't know why it's not there. There. So I don't know why it's not showing up, but I do, but I can show you. Now, what happens inside of VS Code extensions is that we have this concept in the extension model known as contributions. Basically, what you're saying when you talk about contributions is my VS Code extension can contribute something to the VS Code environment. I can contribute commands. I can contribute snippets. The idea is my extension has all these things that it gives the user of VS Code and of my extension so they can actually do more stuff now that they've got my extension installed. So the way you do this, and what's nice is they followed node conventions. So I can go directly into my package JSON file and I can make changes. And the change that I'd want to make would be right here. You see this contributes. It's telling me I've already got one command that I contribute to the environment, and you haven't told me that you contribute any snippets to the environment. So what I have to do now is I have to actually contribute a snippet to here. So I'll do demo 2, and you'll see that it's going ahead and put in the snippet. And you'll see that I've got a snippets contributes line. This is an array, and I can just pass it a list of the different snippet files that contain JSON code that's going to light up snippets inside of my instance of VS Code once somebody installs my extension. Now that I've done that, I'll go ahead and hit F5 one more time. And it's got to work inside of a JS file. So I'm going to open up this JS file. And if I go right here, log to console, there you go. I hit enter. It goes ahead and does this, and I can say test the functionality. Now this is where things get a little super meta. So I've got 3 instances of VS Code open. One of them is the one where I've just got my README. One of them is the one where I'm building my extension. So I'm building my extension inside of this instance of VS Code. I've hit F5 so you can see that I'm running. This is a development instance of VS Code running my extension. So you can kind of see what's happening here. Now if I wanted to test this guy out, I would actually hit F5 one more time, and then I could go in and I could test to make sure that this thing is lighting up. So if I wanted to do that, I'll hit F5. You can see that we've got this guy working. And what I'll show you right here is we've got this console, and we've got the output window. The debug console is where console log is going to fire. So I'm going to be logging stuff into where I'm building my extension. So I can go over here and I can actually run this command, hello world. And when I do, you should see that this thing will light up over here, and of course it's not. So I need to look into that. But I should see console log inside of here. Maybe it's in this guy. No, it's not. Let me close this. Now it's going to show up. No, output. No. Oh, I know why. Let me do this. It's not showing up. Anyway, get the idea. If I were to set a breakpoint inside of this guy, whenever I run this, let me try one more time. Hello world. There you go. I can hit F10. Console log logs the functionality, and we're not seeing the log, but we'll get to that. We'll definitely do more stuff when it comes to the log. But you see, the idea is that I have written a snippet. I've contributed that snippet to the VS Code environment from within my package JSON file to basically light everything up. All right, moving right along. Commands. So you talked a little bit about commands so far, because whenever you create a brand new VS Code extension using the Yo code, it's going to put in this extension say hello guy right here. Now the idea behind this is, just like you saw me add a contributes line in my package JSON file, I've got to contribute right here for this command. So the idea behind this is the one that I was actually building. Let me actually flip back to this instance. I want to flip back to this instance right here. So you'll see that I've already got a command that I've contributed inside of this guy, and now I've actually contributed a snippet in here. And if I were to go into my extension.js file, you'll see that here is my say hello command. Now, one thing that you'll see later on today, if you come to my Azure Tools VS Code Extensibility talk, or my Azure for the Mac developer talk, what you'll see is that I have in the Azure Tools for VS Code, I probably have 30 commands. So you can see the way you wire up a command inside of your extension.js folder is I would create the guy, and then I would push it onto my list of subscriptions. Now imagine if you've got 30 or 40 commands. Here's one of those design implications I want you guys to consider. Do you think it would be easy for you to maintain however many commands you're doing inside of one file? Or do you think it'd be better if you were able to spread those out and let them register themselves? That latter concept is probably going to be easier, because then you can contain all the functionality for your command in your command code. I'm going to kind of show you that in practice today, right now, while we build a brand new command inside of this guy. So what I'll do next is I'm going to create a folder at my root here, and I'm going to call this guy commands. And I'm going to add a file, and we'll call this guy slowprocess.js. And really what we're going to do is we're going to emulate the idea of building a login that takes a little while to run that you would execute from within VS Code. So it's just, we're going to kind of build this guy up as we go. So I've got this slow process guy, and I want to do demo 3 right here. Now what we've done is we've just created a brand new command that lives totally on its own. And all we're going to do is whenever the customer runs that command, we're just going to show them an information message directly inside of the VS Code instance. But what have we forgot to do? We have to contribute it. Remember that. So you have to contribute commands, and you have to contribute snippets, or your commands just won't light up when you try. So I have to go in here, and you'll see that I've got this commands guy. So I'll just do one more time, do demo 4. And now you can see that I've added the command called meta slow process, which is the name of my command, and the title is going to be run the slow process. So if I hit F5 right here, and I do Control Shift P or Command Shift P, and I just type the word slow, there's that run slow process. I'll hit enter. Oh, it hasn't found that command. That's unfortunate. Let me see if I can figure that out. Meta slow process. Oh, I know what's wrong. So what I have to do now is inside of the extension JS file, and this is important because you can see that I've got that context subscriptions push. I hate that they call this disposable. I wish they would have named that variable command, because this is where you're creating an instance of a new command, but it is a disposable object. Yeah, you can split hairs on that. What I have not done is to wire that command up inside of my extension. So at this point, my VS Code extension has no knowledge that I have actually created a command. It's not dialed into the extension. So in order to do that, what I would do is put some code right here. I think we're on demo 5. There you go. So at this point, what I'm doing is, rather than have to add command, 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 and all the functionality for each one of those commands, what I'm doing is I'm referencing this file using the require keyword in JavaScript. I'm looking at that slow process JSON file, or JS file, and then I'm calling slow process, which all it does is it takes an instance of the VS Code context, and it dials that up. So you can see that whereas the original code inside of extension JS does all this, gobbledygook handling the execution of a command and the wire up of that command all inside of extension JS, I'm deferring all that to the file that actually contains my command. So it's sort of like I'm componentizing my construction as I go. Each command file is going to have its own ability to do its own work. The reason I'm talking about this is, as I was building the Azure tools for VS Code, that extension JS file had hundreds of lines in it, and it was the same thing. Create a command, log the command. Create a command, log the command. And as I started getting people contributing, we started having, guess what? Merge conflicts. Because we have all the code in one file. So if you displace those into all the different command files, life becomes a lot easier long term for you. So at this point, I've created the command. I've contributed the command to my package JSON file. And now I have wired the command up inside of extension JS. If all goes well, it should light up here. So I can go open up my instance. What the heck? So it's saying it's not found. Demo fails. Let's see if I'm getting into this guy. Is this right? Function activate? Yep. Should happen. That's weird. It's like it's not finding it. Don't understand. It's not wiring up for some reason. Wonder if I put a breakpoint here. Sorry, folks.
Try putting it off and putting it on again.
Say what?
Try putting it off and putting it on again.
So that works. Oh, I see what's wrong. I see what's wrong. Oh, now I'm actually teaching you as I'm going. because I'm like remembering all these things. So here's the deal. You saw what happened if I put, so if you take a look at this code, extension.js, this is where the command gets handled. This is another great reason not to put all your commands in extension.js. This is where my command gets handled, but you saw that this breakpoint lit up after I ran the command. Here's why. If you go into package.json, if you go into that file one more time, what you'll see is there's this concept called activation events. Which events fire to activate my extension? In this case, there's only one. So here's what I'm going to do. Dirty little trick. Everything. Every time you do anything that this extension knows about, everything lights up in the extension. So this time I'll run this guy. Control-Shift-P. Oh, Command-Shift-P. Slow process. Boom. Starting the slow process. So you can see like all those steps are absolutely necessary. Yes, they were demo fails. But last night when I did these, I had all the same demo fails, and I kept thinking that's a good thing to remember to show them. Because as you go through these steps, you start going, where's my command? I put my command in there. I've put it in contributes. Brady said it should work. I forgot a step. What step did I forget? I forgot how to create it. I've done the contribution, and then I have to register it. So I just want to make sure you've got to go through all those steps. But once you go through those steps, everything gets pretty easy. Now, user experience. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to run this deck here. And I'm going to talk about some of the different user experience points that you need to think about when you're building VS Code. Now, VS Code was really designed for people who use what? Here's what, let me give you a tip. What do you not see sitting next to my computer over here? A mouse. It's not designed for people who like to click. It's designed for people who like to type. Okay, so VS Code is a tool for people who like to type. As a result of that, there's not a lot of UI. There's not a lot of, tree views and stuff like that. They've only got a couple of panes on the side, and that is actually a closed API. So people don't want to extend that left side of VS Code because then the tool becomes unpredictable. We don't want to get into that. So what has happened, oh, this thing's failing me. A brand new toy is failing me. That's okay. What we've done in here is we've given people a bunch of different, we've given users a bunch of different ways that they can do things that are important user experience points that any IDE is going to need. Obviously, we're going to want to show users progress updates. Here's the API that you could do that. Now you saw when I was writing to console, I'm writing inside of my debug instance. But let's say you're using my extension. You're not going to be debugging my extension's code. So if I'm writing console log, you're not going to see any messages. So that's when create output channel becomes important. Toolbar buttons. You can put toolbar buttons on, and you would do that using create status bar item, et cetera, et cetera. I just want you to see this so you can see that for a lot of these individual pieces of functionality that you would need to do as a developer, there's APIs for all of it. Most of them hang off of the VS Code NPM package, specifically the window object. But you've also got things like the Workspace Object, which represents that Control-Shift-E window where I can see the tree view with all my files. So you do have that capability. We can show input boxes that collect data. We can show information messages. And of course, we can tell the user that something bad happened with show error message. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to put some output messages so that the user knows what's going on. I learned this the hard way. I have, like I said, about 30 commands in my Azure Tools extension. And we're talking back and forth with the Azure Management APIs. The chances of something going south, pretty good. So a lot of times the user was like sending a command up to Azure that might fail or might take longer than they expected. They had no information in VS Code that something was happening. So I had to harness the power of the output window, which I've done in a pretty good way. Now what I'll do now is I'll reopen up slow process. And again, think if you started adding a whole bunch of different extensions, you'd be doing all this stuff in extension.js. I'm only doing this inside of my commands code. So I do want to point that out. So the first thing that I'm going to do here, do demo 6, user snippet. And what this is going to do is it's going to create an instance of the output channel using vscode.window.createOutputChannel. And I'm just calling it meta. This is my meta extension. It's extension for extension authors. I'm going to show that output channel down here, which is going to be this window. So you can see that I've got Azure Tools installed, so my Azure Tools is showing up. Usually what will happen is whenever you call that create output channel and you pass it the string for the output channel that you want to see, it automatically focuses, it just lights up for you. So I'm going to go ahead and hit F5 right here. And I've got my output window open. You can see that I haven't done anything with it yet. So I'm going to do Control-Shift-P and do slow process. Starting the slow process, and you can see now I've actually got information coming my way. So I can see what's going on. Now imagine if you were using VS Code or Visual Studio, you were doing those long processes and you didn't see these warnings. You would have no idea if the tool was working or not, right? Which is exactly the feedback that I got from all 15,000 of my downloaders. So I do want to point out, this is a great way for you to show people what's going on. You don't want to use console log, you want to use that output channel. So I do want to stress that. So I'll close this window down. And then the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to actually add some buttons so that we can run these commands. So now we're talking about doing toolbars and buttons. Now the toolbar, not a lot of real estate. Do want to point that out. Toolbar is going to be down here. So you can see that I've already got my Git branch that I'm on, and I've got this guy, which is going to be problems that are going on in VS. I don't have any problems right now. Again, I could actually dial into problems, like if your extension experiences a problem, you could throw warnings up in the problems area. So everything in here is available to you as an author. But you can see that I don't have a lot of room. I've got a pretty good monitor, but it only goes to right here, so I've only got this room. Now I work on the Docs MS Com crew. We have about 300 people in our org who are writers. We actually have a built-in, an extension built in-house with things like bold, italicize, insert a link, yada, yada, yada. We've got about 20 buttons running across, and people on a small monitor are out of room already. So I do want to stress, these things are things that you need to consider as you start throwing buttons in the VS Code. So what I'll do first is I'm going to go ahead and make a new folder right here. I'm going to call it, I think I called it utils. I think that's what I called it. And I'm going to create a new guy in here. I'll call it toolbar.js. And Toolbar Jas is going to open up, and I'll just go ahead and do, what demo are we on? That's not it. Demo 6. No, demo 7. There you go. So in this case, what I'm doing is I'm saying I'm exporting this add button method, and all that's going to do is that's going to give me a method that takes a command, the text that I want to show the user down here, master, and then the tooltip. What happens when they mouse over it and there's a tooltip that pops open, as there isn't on that guy. So I do want to point out that you have that capability. Now that I've got this toolbar installed, oh, what's that? I don't need that. I'm going to go back in here to slow process. And what was that last demo I was on? 7? We'll do that. That's not what I wanted. 8. There. Now I'm requiring my toolbar, and you can see that all I'm doing is I'm pulling that guy in directly from the utils toolbar JS file, and you'll see that it's just telling me, like, you created this guy and you're not using it. So what I want to do now is run demo 9, where I will actually add that button directly to my guy. And I'm going to call this guy, I know what it is. It's const. What did I call it? Meta slow process. I think that's what I called it. Yeah, meta slow process. That's my command name right here. I could probably do something like this. Life would be a lot cleaner, but you get the idea. So what I want to do now is whenever somebody clicks the button, I want to run that command, which is this command. Again, I'm containing everything in one place. When my command lights up, I'm going to go ahead and put the button on the toolbar so that the user could actually run this command without having to use the command palette. So right now I'll just hit F5, and what you should see first should light up. Oh, didn't light up. That's annoying. Oh, I know why. I put it in the wrong place. Put this guy right here. Sorry, folks. All right. Now I can do this. The button should light up. There we go. So you can see that I've got this bug right here. And it says submit a bug, and when I click that, it's actually going to run my commands. I'll click this, starting the slow process. You'll see that after 3 seconds, the process will be complete. It's exactly the same thing if I went Command-Shift-P and typed slow process, and I'll party on it. You can put these buttons down here. So now people can people that know the name of the command, they can go up and use the command palette. People that don't know the command, new users can go down and they can hit the buttons. One thing I do want to point out, and there's pretty extensive documentation on the API site about it, is that they actually have a set of icons that you can use. There's a bug icon, there's the warning icon, the negative icon, et cetera, et cetera. There's a couple dozen of these icons that you can use, and it's actually a static list. Like you can't, write your own, you can't make your own icon and inject that icon into VS Code. You can only use this one set. That's all in the documentation. So if you wanted to take a look at the API docs, they walk through all the different ones that are available, and they even show you a picture with all the names. So you can actually see which ones. If you've ever used Bootstrap, anybody use Twitter Bootstrap? It's kind of the same idea. You've got like a set number of icons you can use, and they're all well named. So there's a world icon. I know I use that one. So next thing is we're going to do one more demo on user experience, and we're going to do things like confirm when things are complete. You've already seen one of those, the show information message, report when things break, and obviously we're going to need to collect user input at some point or another. So what I'll do is I'm going to tweak this commands code. I'm actually going to select all of it here, just do demo 10. I think that's it. And you can see that I've got some consts up here, like just some strings that I can just drop into other places. The first thing I want to point out, again, if you remember that API model that I showed earlier, I'm going to do show input box. So at this point, I'm going to collect information from the user. The only thing I'm going to accept is the top secret password. Okay, so I just want to stress top secret password. I could put some threes in it and make it super hard to guess, but you get the idea. We're just taking the password. Now, really quickly, just so you know how to find this documentation yourself, I'm going to copy that show input box and do a quick find for it. And you can see that that's all inside of the API documentation. It shows you everything you would need to do. It tells you what it's going to hand back. Now, one thing I'm going to point out is you see this guy right here, thenable. Okay, that's kind of a TypeScriptism. It's almost like a JavaScript promise. Okay, and the idea behind this is like I'm going to call show input box, and I could do .then, and it kind of becomes like fluent. You know what I mean? It's like I just call back, call back, call back, call back. I point that out because thenable, whenever you look at this signature, you're going to see it's going to have a double generic. One of them is going to be what it's going to take, and then the other one's going to be, I think it's the error state, and they just don't have an error state. So at this point, whenever you do show input box, it's going to throw up the input box. The user is going to type in the information, hit enter, and then your callback is going to run, and it's going to pass a string. And it's going to be what that user actually typed in. So I do want to point that out. And then the other one that we're going to talk about, if I do control find, show quick, not that. Control find, show quick pick. And show quick pick is going to give you a list. It'll give you a drop-down list. And I love how they've made it easy. The parameters, you just give it an array of strings, or you give it an array of objects that you can turn into strings. So it just gives you all this capability, just super logical. In my code, what I'm doing is I'm going to say show the input box. You can see where this function ends right here. Once that function ends, because they've typed something into the box, we're going to run then, passing the value. And you can see that I'm just using lambdas in JavaScript. Kind of an odd thing to think about, but it makes my JavaScript more like C#. I love lambdas, so I can do lambdas inside of JavaScript. Anybody know you could do that? Did you learn that today? Cool, right? It's hot. So you don't have to type function, function, function. Who gets sick of typing function over and over and over again in JavaScript? Gosh, you don't have to anymore. I've saved you hours and hours of typing the word function. You can see that it's going to take the value. It's going to do a quick contrast on it. If they've typed in the word secret, then I'm going to show them a list. And I'm going to say, do you want to do this or not? If they want to do it, again, show quick pick is thenable. And the thing that's going to pass is what they selected from that drop-down list. You'll see this like crazy in the Azure Tools demo if you come later. I encourage you to do so. And then we just kind of have all the existing functionality we already had. And if they don't type the secret password, we're going to show them an error message and just tell them that they've done something wrong. So if I hit F5 here, you'll see that now we're becoming, we're getting almost legitimate with this extension. I go down here, I want to submit a bug. I type this, it says, hey, you got to enter in a password. I'll go ahead and enter in the secret password. It says, are you sure you want to start the process? Yeah, no, never mind. I don't want to start the process. Oh, I forgot. I really do need to do this. Oh, I got to type the password every time. That's annoying. Bad design. Yes, start the process. And now we're starting the slow process. And once the slow process is done, we show the user an information message. So you see now we're kind of putting together this UX and doing some interesting stuff. Does that make sense? You like that? Cool. Any questions up to this point? Sure. Oh.
Yeah.
This one?
Yeah. This VS Code, that's the DOM of VS Code.
Pretty much, yeah. That's the object model of VS Code, yeah.
Is there an overview of this DOM in the documentation?
there is an overview of the DOM in the documentation. If you were to take a look, there's the API documentation. You can see all that good stuff. If I were to take a look at, there's a nice overview where you can really see, there's the package JSON extension manifest, so you learn all the stuff that you could put in, contribution points, there's the namespace. You get into the complex commands. That's really just all the different execution things that you can do. VS Code has a code lens. You could actually dial in a code lens. So you could actually put windows up over the text and show people links and whatnot. So you have a lot of capability. So there's all that's in the documentation. In terms of like the high level stuff, not really. You've got, if you look here, you've got env. You would also see window. Here it is. So these are the main guys that kind of hang off. You have access to the SCM. So you could actually party on the Git functionality from within VS Code, which is pretty cool. You can, if you write an extension that depends on other extensions, I could use extension A in extension B. So I could have extension A trigger a command in extension B if I want to. And then there's a really cool event aggregator. Do you guys know about event aggregation? Like one component throws up an event and everybody can handle it however they want to. There's a great built-in event aggregator inside of the VS Code extensibility model. So I've used it once. Not that it's bad, I'm not that bright. So I just haven't really tried it out yet. But yeah, you've got all the access to it. And if you look at the object model, obviously you're going to have a little bit better fidelity looking at the object model if you're doing things in VS Code, excuse me, in TypeScript. But you can definitely see I can do VS Code, and you'll see I've got code lens, all the commands, all the different stuff. If I go deep enough, you can see there's window. And then that's when you can see show quick pick and show input box and all that. So it's a pretty easy to follow object model. I figured it out, like I said, in my free time. So editor interaction. This gets interesting. I've got one demo that I'll show you here. And this is when we start talking about code lens and like highlighting words and that kind of thing. What I'm going to do is run this. And what we'll talk about briefly is concepts like editor interactions, which is basically a way for me to show the user something inside of the active code editing window. You guys are probably Visual Studio users. Do you know about control period? When you do control period, it puts in the using statement for you. You've got nice refactoring windows and dialogues that can pop open inside of Visual Studio. You have all that kind of stuff inside of VS Code as well. And what I'm going to do is kind of a hokey demo where I'm going to use what's called a text decoration. The idea behind a text decoration is it's going to scan the active document in the editor and look for an array of words. And when it finds those words, it's going to apply a style just to those words. So I can highlight important pieces of the document. So here are a couple of the APIs we're going to look at. You can see here we've got our first workspace guy appearing. The first one is going to be window.create text editor decoration type. Ugh, some of these API models are just crazy. This guy literally is the style that I want to apply to a string. That's it. And it's an object, and all the properties of that object are CSS attributes. So I can make the background purple, do whatever I want. Window.active text editor is going to give you a reference to the active editor and the document that happens to be in that editor. Window active text editor set decorations. This is when up here I create a decoration. If I want to set it, I would do it right here. I would basically say, now I want you to take this decoration and jam it into the editor. Moving right along, these are basically two events that are going to fire from within VS Code. The first one is going to be window on did change active text editor. That basically says I opened up readme.md and then I switched over to package JSON. That guy's going to fire. And it's going to scan the text and do whatever I want to do with it. And then workspace on did change the active text document. That's actually, this guy fires. What I just described is this method, when I actually change the document that I have open. This is whenever I type a new word. So I type a new word and I pause for a second, this event will fire, and it will affect the text in the document. So we can actually decorate different areas of the text when we're within VS Code. So I hit end show, wait for it to refresh. And I want to go over here and I'm going to do a brand new file. I'm going to call this guy decorations.js, and I'm going to do demo, I think it's 12, nope, demo 11, doom. Okay, I'm going to walk through this code. I've highlighted the important parts of this code, but I'll just kind of show you what's happening. This first one, the create text editor decoration type, you can see all I'm doing is I'm saying I want to give it a border. give it a little bit of padding, give it a style, make it colorized, basically change the way the text is going to look inside that editor. And then these methods basically just fire, they're kind of my utility methods. The first one, trigger the update. That's just going to run whenever somebody changes the active window. And then update decorations, that's what's going to happen whenever the timeout runs. So the idea is I don't want this to be running all the time. Every time I type a character, that would drive you bonkers. It would slow down the editor. So every time you type, I'm going to wait half a second. And if you don't do anything, then I'm going to run update. And I'm going to start updating all the stuff. You think to yourself, this sounds like this is going to slow down the IDE gratuitously. But think about how fast a video game runs, 60 or 30 frames per second. This is one of these loops that's happening so fast that it's happening in the background. You're not going to notice it. I haven't noticed it when it's impacting VS Code, and I've got a lot of extensions installed that do exactly what I'm talking about here. And there are a bunch of them built into the VS Code extensibility model already. So if you're using VS Code and you don't notice a lot of latency when you're editing text, it's because of that background thread running this. It's not going to impact your stuff at all. Just want to point all that out. And then these are my two event handlers. The idea behind these two is whenever somebody changes the active document that's open, or whenever they type information, these two events are going to fire, and I'm going to update the decorations. It makes a lot more sense when you actually see it running. So I'm going to go into extension.js, which is this guy right here. And I'll do demo 12, is that right? And that's going to pull in the utils decorations. We'll change this so that it pulls in the right one. And now I'll hit F5. Now the last thing I need to do is demo 13. Is I'm going to say, I've got 3 different strings that I'm going to be looking for here. I'm going to be looking for VS Code. I'm going to be looking for the word extensions. I'm going to be looking for the word Microsoft. And I'm just going to go ahead and activate that guy, passing in the context and all that. So you can see here that I've created, this is my file that you saw over here. Whenever I call activate, I pass in the VS Code context, and I pass in the list of search terms. And it's going to start scanning that editor for all those search terms whenever I change the document or whenever I happen to type new text. The reason I'm building this is in Azure land, we have this concept called Azure Resource Manager Templates. If I were to go to docs, Microsoft.com, and pull up Azure.com, excuse me, Azure Templates, I'll show you over here at reference. If I were to open up container registry, for instance, you're going to see this string right here, Microsoft.container registry / registries. And that's basically the identifier of a type of template that I could use to create new container service instances. What I'm doing is, you'll see this during the Azure Tools demo, I have a couple of tools in the extension that will allow you to do things like edit ARM templates or deploy ARM templates. And I figure there's a lot of these guys. If I look at availability sets, you can see there's another one. The way I was thinking about it is if I'm editing an ARM template, I want to highlight whenever I've got one of those schema objects so the user can click it and go directly to the docs. So it's one of those things that'll just happen all the time as people are typing. My demo is not as useful, but it's a demo. So I'll hit F5, and I'll do a new file right here, and I'll just type learn how to write VS Code extensions through Microsoft. See there? So see what's happening? As I type, it's actually changing the highlighted text. And I can even add hyperlinks there. So I could move my mouse over one of those guys and click it, and it would take me out to the documentation. So you can imagine how useful that could be if you've got complex stuff in your object model and you want to document it on the fly. So I'll just run this guy real quick and go over to done the decorate important text. Publishing. The last thing I'll show you is around publishing. Publishing is pretty easy. I want to close down this instance, and what I'll do now is I want to fire up. I want to do that. I'm actually going to hit Control J and go here to terminal. You've got a built-in terminal directly inside of your VS Code instance. And what I'm going to do is type VSCE package. And what that's going to do is it's going to use, so this is pretty cool. It's going to say, hey, I know what the default README looks like. You haven't changed it at all. So you haven't customized it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here and say, okay, work. And then I'll just delete everything else. Or I could delete all this stuff. And that'll make sense later. And I'll do this one more time, VSCE package. What that does is that takes everything. I'll do this, open dot. You'll see that I have this v6 right here. Now that v6 I could actually hand off to you, and you could use it to install this extension, and you could test it if you want to. Now one thing you'll see is that it's 001. If I'm ready to ship this guy, if I'm confident that all my functionality is the way I want it to be, I could actually go here and I could change it to 10. Save this guy one more time, and then I will do VSCE package one more time. And if I flip over to my Explorer, you'll see now I've got the 10 package. Does that make sense? So I've gone ahead and I've created one, and then I've updated it. Now, how do you publish it into the store? That part's really, really, really easy. The hardest part is remembering the URL. So what you have to do is you have to create your own publisher account in the marketplace. Mine is my name, Brady Gaster, because I'm really creative. And this is what your URL looks like. My advice is once you create your publisher and you can get to this screen, bookmark it. Seriously, I always forget this URL. Just wanted to point it out to you. And this is just where you would go, and you would see all the extensions that you've already created. You would literally click the Upload Extension button. When you click the Upload Extension button, this window is going to pop open. You don't even have to hit Browse. You can actually drag that v6 in, and then I could hit Go, and that would upload it. And if I wanted to make an update, I've already got one in here. If I were to go here and say Upload New, it's going to say, hey, you've already got an extension with that name. I could right-click it, and I could select Update, and then it's going to throw up that same dialog, and I would be able to upload that extension and basically do an update on it. And then everybody all through the world that has my extension installed, they get that update automatically, because that's the way VS Code works. Now what I could do here, I could go out to my list of extensions, because I do have a bookmark, so I always forget it. I could do Upload My Extension. I'll flip over to this guy, and I could drag in this guy and click Upload. And you'll see that that is my 001. It's going to do a quick verification, and I want to go ahead and update it to my 10 release, because I know I'm ready to ship this guy. I could drag this one in, and I hit Upload, and what you'll see is that our version is going to go from 0.1 to 1.0. So you can see that we've already done it. And one thing to point out is that I could go here and I could right-click it and I could say Remove. Let's say you've already got people using your extension. It's not going to be there anymore. Okay? It's not going to uninstall the extension. They just won't ever be able to update it again. And if for whatever reason they reformat their computer, they'll never be able to get it again. So it's just something I want to point out. If you 86 your extension from the marketplace, it's gone. Like nobody can install it anymore. So with all of that being said, I'll go to our last slide here, which is a couple of design considerations. Again, I've kind of talked about some of these things already. The command line focus is definitely important to remember. People who use VS Code like the keyboard. So just remember they like the keyboard. I haven't shown you how to do key bindings, but all those commands, you can actually attach key bindings to them. So you can do Control-Shift-E or Control-Shift-B, something along those lines. People can light things up. One thing I would encourage is try to find keystrokes that aren't already being used. Like, so, you know, like what we've done in the authoring extension we have at work is you have 4 buttons to push. We figured nobody else is stupid enough to do that. We're going to make our personal team members have to use 4 keys. So we're really polite to our users. Yeah, it's something crazy. It's like Control-Alt-Command-Shift-2. But here's why we don't really care. They can remap it. So you can go into your user preferences and you can remap all that stuff if you want to. We kind of expected people would do that. So embrace extension. If you realize, here's a great example. If you realize that something you've got in your extension could be used by somebody else's extension, take that functionality out and make it an extension on its own, and then take a dependency on it from your original extension. Perfect example. I have the Azure tools for VS Code. My extension doesn't allow for publishing because I had not learned how to use the Kudu API. Jonathan Carter, who's a great dev, he's actually a PM at Microsoft, he has written a new thing called AZJS, which is a nice way for Node developers to get their stuff up from VS Code. He uses the Kudu API to do publishing. He showed me where the line of code is, and I've got one of my teammates who's actually taking that code out, making a third extension Jonathan's going to take a dependency on it. I'm going to take a dependency on it. And then if you wanted to write your own extension, you would have Kudu publish, you know, at your leisure. We're also doing the same thing with logging in, because there's 1,000 different ways to log in. We want one. Okay. It's open source at heart. The irony about this is the only extensions that I have seen without a Git repository link are internal Microsoft extensions. The irony of that is overwhelming. Not all of them are, but there are quite a few that have not been open sourced yet. VS Code is open source. Most of the extensions are open source. Just go with it. Just make it MIT and put it out there. Data drive your feature decisions. I would say this to everybody. Use telemetry to figure out how people are using your extension. Like I used Application Insights. I think my bill went from $30 a month to $36 a month when I started using App Insights. But every time somebody uses my extension, I know exactly what they did. Here's another thing. When you give somebody, like when you build your extension, you put telemetry in it, give the user a way to turn it off, because some users might not like it. Okay, and the way you can do that, again, this is all in the VS Code extension API documentation. You can actually create custom configuration areas inside of the user's config file. So any extension can actually enlist or it can contribute, some important word, any extension can contribute its own configuration settings. So you could allow configuration out the wazoo if you want to. So I do want to point out that you have all that capability at your hands. And just wanted to thank you guys for coming here. There's definitely some other topics going on right now. So thanks a lot for taking an hour and coming out and learning about this stuff. I do appreciate it. Again, you know how to find me on Twitter, Brady Gaster. My email address is bradygg@microsoft.com. If you want to email me, if you've got a problem, I can definitely try to find you somebody who can help you out. I do want to point out one thing. One of the things you learn on your first day at Microsoft, there's a series of very interesting numbers that they give you, like how many versions of Office have been sold over the years, yada, yada. One of those numbers is how many emails get sent from one Microsoft.com address to another Microsoft.com address every single day. Anybody want to take a stab at that? 25 million. 25 million emails are sent internally every day. I get about 45% of those emails. So if I don't get back to you right away, it's not that I don't like you, I don't consider your problem important, it's that I've got a lot of emails. But I'll always find somebody to help you if I can't help you myself. And the last thing to think about is you want to add value. If you need this feature inside, you can think of a feature inside of VS Code. There's a billion VS Code users, not many, but you get the idea. There's a lot of us. If you can think of the idea, somebody else probably needs it too. So just write an extension, build it, ship it, and then people will go and use it. Cool. Thanks a lot for taking the time. I hope to see you later on this afternoon and talk about Azure. Cool. Is that on time? Am I over?